I got shit everywhere, man. I ended up destroying this comic book room tonight. You ought to see it. There's all kinds of comics all over the place. All because I wanted to dig out 3 books. You know, it happens. But basically, you know, the insomnia is hitting again. The job hunting has gone on. The car broke down. So I was like, yeah, okay. There's a little contest going on that Vincru12000 is doing for reaching, I think he said 450 subs, and whether that's the right number or not, I'm sure he's past that, and he deserves a whole bunch more. He has, I enjoy him. He has these weekly back issue comic calls every week, and you know, he's pretty knowledgeable about his stuff. Gets some really great books, and I might be getting the number 450 from the fact that in the contest video, I'm pretty sure he just said he bought 450 comics last week. So I think we've got quite a few videos coming from him, which is always good. So, you know, I figured why not. I'll go ahead and jump in there and tell you to subscribe to his channel and answer his questions he's got here. And I wrote them down, you know. So, you know, and there's 5 questions here. 1 or 2 I'm probably going to get preachy on, so settle in or skip around or whatever. But first question, his exact words is that he wants you to put on your Nostradamus cap, you know, predict the future of the next couple years, and answer what's going to happen in the comic industry the next few years. And actually the rest of his questions, some of that kind of ties into that. Now, as far as the comics industry that's going to happen in the next few years, anybody that's watched my channel for, you know, forever, you know, when I started and stuff, you probably already know this, but my thing is that not only do I like the comic book history of the comics, but I love hearing the stories of behind the scenes and the creators and how comics came about, and you know, the witch hunt that went on in the 50s with comics, and you know how comics helped in the 40s with the war, and all the comic book creators that just kind of like, you know, the comic book creators like Jack Kirby and Stan Lee and a bunch of the Walt Disney animators and stuff, how they all just kind of went on to war, and when they came back they picked right where they left off and all that stuff. But what's new is how the movies have taken off, how comics for once have actually gone mainstream. I do consider it mainstream when people who when Rocket Raccoon has become a household word. You know, you can't really argue with that. So it's a little bit. This is the first time where it's really unpredictable. The DC 52, the industry's changed in a way where, you know, you don't really have these books anymore where it's a creative team that stay on them for a long time. A la like Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. You know, great teams like Chris Claremont, John Byrne. John Byrne trying to break the run that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had on Fantastic Four. You know, those days seem to be over. You know, rebooting the books every, you know, 30, you know, about every 30 issues, rehashing, recycling the same characters because creators have, you know, wised up since Image came out, and you know, keep your own characters. It could be money. The big companies will, you know, you're work for hire, so you get screwed out of a creation unless you've got a really good contract and all these behind the scene things. So what I think is going to end up happening is that the bubble, which is a question here that I won't get into right now, but what I think is going to happen is that it's going to be like music. Okay, whenever music gets stale, or we get tired of seeing the same thing, the people who have the real passion for it will be considered underground. That's where your good music comes from and what influences everybody. That's the honest, passionate stuff where it's as honest as it can be, considering you got to be just commercial enough to you know, have a following on the book and to make money so you can keep it going. That's a harsh reality, but you know, before you knew all this stuff, or as you got older and put all this stuff together, you still enjoyed the comics. But I think there's going to be an underground movement somehow. I don't know what the books are going. And when I say underground, I don't mean obscure, but like, you know, you have guys like Eric Powell, who's putting out Goon, who's doing Big Trouble in Little China, who's done Godzilla, and on the side he sponsors a roller derby team, and he does conventions, and he's always got his hand in stuff, and he's kind of one of the independent guys and stuff. I think we're going to see things tagged on to comics that, if you don't know your comic book history, you don't know, and it is going to repeat. The underground comics of the 60s and 70s that I go back and forth with, the Robert Crumbs, Basil Wolvertons, stuff like that. If there's going to be names all of a sudden where you get back in, and if you're really into the hobby, these are the comics that are going to speak to you because they're comics. They're not now commercials for movies and stuff. So that's what I think. I think there's going to be a bunch of Outlaws come out. The last time we really had a bunch of Outlaws come out, like what I'm talking about, would be your Greg Rucka, Brian Bendis, Ed Brubaker. Oh my God, and there's one more and stuff. You had these crime novelists, these crime comics come out. You had a resurgence in the late 90s of these guys coming out and doing things. Bendis ended up more or less taking over Marvel. We've had the movie Whiteout. We've had Powers turned into a TV show. We have Elias coming and stuff. So it's going to be something like that. I don't know if there's going to be the big blockbusters or not, but I think you're going to end up having some quality comics where you're like, damn it, these are comics again. This is stuff that can only happen in comics, Is there a bubble in the industry, and why? This goes back to comic book history. That's the second question. If you watched my videos before, I'm going to kind of apologize to you, Vincru, if I lose you or anybody watching this. My mind works in a way where I see the dots and I connect everything. Okay, I mean, I just look at it and everything relates to everyone else, like in the comics and stuff. But the bubble in the industry goes back to the first question. See, there's always been bubbles in the industry, and the pattern is that they hit anywhere from 15 to 20 years. Okay, the comics were selling after the debut of Superman and Captain Marvel and Batman and Captain America and all that stuff, and World War II hit. One comic could sell 1 million copies in 1 month, even though they were like 5-10 cents back then and stuff. It's still a lot of money back then. And then when the war was over, there was no need for the heroes. There was no need for these heroes to sit here and have a common enemy. We had a real enemy. It was one of the last times that there was a black and white evil in the world, and everybody wanted their heroes, and heroes all wanted to take out. I mean, before we were even in the war, Captain America is on the cover of this comic book knocking out Hitler, And then people wanted to, and then all of a sudden everybody wanted things to go back to normal, and that reflected it. To me, comic books are, if you want to know the day-to-day history of America and what was going on in the world back then, just kind of look at the trends and stuff that's going on in comics and the tone of the stories of what people wanted. Everybody came back from the war. They were it's one of the reasons they're considered the greatest generation is that they just picked right back up where they left off. I'm sure they had PTSD and all that stuff's been covered before, but they picked right up. They felt secure. They survived the Depression. They beat evil in the world, and there was no need for the heroes and stuff. So what happened? Romance comics came up because comics were starting to die again. Horror comics, romance comics. Jack Kirby and Joe Simon. Is that right? Anyway, invented the romance comic in America, And, you had like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman survive, the big three. You had Captain Comic kind of come out. The Martian Manhunter started playing around with it. And then the bubble about bust right there after World War II, the bubble about bust again when they started getting up steam with EC Comics and stuff. With the witch hunts, the Seduction of the Innocent fiasco, The Comics Code Authority came in and stuff. That wiped them out again. All of a sudden, everybody was more ashamed and would lie more about what they did for a living and stuff. Working in comics was never, a big glamorous job. That glamour was, I say that glamour was brought on by Stan Lee being in the right place, right time, and being a great interview. I could cover all kinds of stuff if I don't watch here. And I'm not bragging. I'm keeping myself in check here. But the bubbles always hit, and what always brings us out of those bubbles? A big resurgence, okay? A big spark of creativity, one new idea, okay? The Silver Age did start with the Flash, in '56, is what everybody, agrees on and stuff, but that's still debatable too. But what really hit, in my opinion, was the bringing of continuity to comics, which is what Marvel did, and this is why there's a big resurgence in the movies of comic books. Is they brought that same continuity to the movies, which was always the Marvel plan. So that's always great. That's always good. But what happens is that, like, yeah, that big resurgence comes. You know, everybody, you know, the college kids got into the comic books, and it kind of grows, and people like Stan Lee and Len Wein and Steve Englehart and Gary Conway, who've grown up on these comic books, they actually want to work in this field of comic books, and the hippies come in. You know, Jim Shooter, 14 years old, you know, he comes in, and they're like looking up in phone books where these creators live. And back then, you could go to their house. Len Wein and Marv Wolfman and a whole bunch of other hippies would look up Jack Kirby's address in a phone book, and they'd go over there, and Roz, his wife, would sit there and feed everybody sandwiches, and they'd go back there and watch Kirby work and stuff, you know, Mark Avener and all them and stuff. And so all of a sudden, you know, you got these new ideas in there, and they built it up, and it was getting bigger and bigger. It was coming off of the 60s into the 70s and the Bronze Age. Now the hippies are coming in and doing these great things, and I say that lovingly with them, you know. And it got bigger and bigger, and everybody's putting out more books. The competition came out. DC Comics in the 60s actually controlled the company that distributed books, and a lot of people don't realize Marvel was really limited on the number of books they could put out in Silver Age. That's why you had Tales of Suspense, Tales of Astonish, Strange Tales, where you had two people in one book. Just seeing if I got one laying around. But anyway, anybody knows what I'm talking about there. I got to go downstairs, but you know, they had two characters in one book, you know, with two separate stories going on. And in the 70s, Marvel became number one, put out books. What did DC do? Let's flood the market. And that's what happened. That's why you had the great DC implosion of the 70s and stuff. Oversaturating the market is what does it. Inferior product is what does it. Not being, you know, real creative. So that about put DC out, and they came out of it. And then as for what was going on in the 90s, there was a time where there were over 800 books on the shelves. Everybody came in. Everybody started publishing. In the 80s, you had the black and white explosion, the opposite. You know, the pendulum swung the other way. And all of a sudden, all these black and white comic books were coming out. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I'm not saying they started it, but that's what I'm talking about. You know, all of a sudden, all these black and white books came out, and all these indie books kind of came out. And that just kind of grew and grew and grew. And by the time the 90s hit, with it, you know, the Batman movie of '89, everything's connected, more people coming in, bam, you know, the bubble got bigger, bigger, and it blew. It shrinks and it blues and it shrinks. You know, Marvel almost went out of business in the 90s. Not a lot of people remember that. They filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And, you know, and that's where, you know, Tom DeFalco, Bob Harris, and a bunch of other guys got the boot. And when they brought in Joe Quesada, he simply gave independent creators control of these books. I mean, you had Richard Corbin doing a Banner miniseries. You had Mike Allred of Madman fame doing, you know, completely redoing it with another writer. I can't remember his name. I want to say it was Milligan. You know, they come out with X-Force. Okay, so he brought in all the indie guys that he had met. You know, Bendis worked at DC. He worked at Valiant. He did his event comics. He came in with Marvel Knights with, you know, over 4 books. Actually worked directly on one. And those were successes, and it was because he was bringing in these outlaws, I hope, that come back, you know. That's what I call them. And, you know, just rejuvenated everything. And then what does he do? He turns around and he gives us everything that long-term collectors had wanted. He actually embraced the people who had been buying the comics and grew up with them when he started out. And that's where we got Justice League versus Avengers. That's where he actually grabbed a guy who worked at Marvel who's known as, you know, the unofficial historian. And he found out that with Jim Shooter, and there's several names that could have been at DC, but basically it was a pissing contest, so they just dropped it. That's why you had the George Perez pages already done, and you know they dropped it. So Bendis gave the correct people what they wanted. We got Wolverine Origins out of it and stuff. Not saying that was a good idea, but you know it'd been 30 years by then. You know, let's face it, it had to be time. So that's what I'm trying to get. He gave it to him. That's how you survive the bubble. You actually come out with stories that people want, and you tell them, and you respect the material and stuff. And, you know, Marvel threw away the continuity is what they did, and they made an out where they're saying, well, characters aren't acting right. That's the plan, because they're scrolls, and all this continuity is keeping us from telling quality stories. What's sad is that, can you really stand there and hold up, as you know, look at the 80s. I'm not saying time was better, but look at the 80s. Okay, Dark Phoenix Saga, Demon in a Bottle, Born Again. You know, all these great X-Men stories, and I can go on and on. Do you really have a classic run in the last couple years at Marvel on anything? I mean, that holds up to those. You know, that's what I'm getting at. You know. So yeah, there's a bubble, and that's why it gets too big. You know, Marvel in the 90s, one of their problems was that they actually said, when people were trying to tell them, and the suits came in and split up Marvel into the Spider-Verse, the Edge-verse, the Avengers books, and split them up. Even Mark Gruenwald said this isn't good. These were the suits that came down. And your creators and your writers and editors are the ones on the front line who are taking it from us fans, when some of the stuff's not their decision. Basically, somebody at Marvel, one of those suits, more or less told the readers they could pretty much go screw themselves, because we can put Spider-Man on anything and it'll sell. And if you remember the 90s, that was a sad time for Marvel. They ended up giving 4 of their books to 2 Image guys, Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee, and to try to bring in people. You know, Marvel outsourced their books to the people that told them that, you know, we're doing our own thing with Image, and we're just giving you a heads up that we're doing it, you know, and we're in your face telling you. And I can tell you stories about Image, those Image guys going from the Marvel offices straight to the DC offices, and I'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so yeah, there's a bubble, and it hits about every 15 or 20 years, and it's multiple things, you know. Right now we got the movies bringing in a lot of people, but we'll you know, comics is a passion, as a hobby, just like any other hobby. And all these people, you know, are they going to stick to it? I wouldn't. If I was coming into it right now, I wouldn't. I'd probably be a back issue guy completely. You know. Okay, make a suggestion to the big three to improve positions with their readers. And he wants Marvel, DC, and Image and stuff. Right off the bat with Marvel, okay, let's go with Image. First thing with Image, Image started out, and it was about creators. When Eric Larson, Todd McFarlane, Jim Valentino, Will Sportatio, Jim Lee, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, all decided they were going to do it. It was Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane like rallying everybody up. You know, a few of those guys were like, I don't know about this, but they went. And they went straight to the Marvel offices, told them what they're doing. We're going to own our own product. You're screwing us out, you know. And this is right after X-Men #1 and Spider-Man #1. X-Men #1 by Jim Lee, Chris Claremont, and Spider-Man by written and drawn by Todd McFarlane broke records as being, you know, the comic that sold the most issues ever and all this stuff. They went in and they told them what they're doing. They went to DC. When they went straight in there to DC just to tell everybody what they were doing. What was funny about Marvel, before I tell you that, is when Marvel was talking to the head of Marvel, when those guys that were getting ready to form Image was getting ready to were in that office talking to some head honcho, I can't remember who it was at the time, head honcho, the publisher probably, of Marvel. Tom DeFalco had his ear to the door, and he was so intent on, you know, what he wanted to hear that he actually fell through the door and rolled into the office. That's how big of a deal this was. So as soon as they were done with Marvel, they went straight across town to DC, went into the DC offices, and DC was like, here's the deal. Here's your, we already came up with a contract where, you know, we can share, you know, your creations, and you know, you still get credit and stuff like that. And it was a pretty good deal, and I think it was the deal that they ended up giving Neil Gaiman. You know, that's where the contract had come from. It was coming from what was about to be Vertigo, okay? And Todd McFarlane looked at him and said, did one creator help make that contract? And they said, well, no. And they like, we're out of here. Right there, DC, if they had just said, you want to help us make a new contract, things might have changed, okay? So that's what Marvel and DC need to do. They've had contracts that work within the system. Chris Claremont had a working contract with DC where he had Sovereign 7, and he could use those characters from DC and still have control of everything. But he ended up making the whole series like a dream or something, from what I remember. It didn't really happen, you know, and stuff like in the series and stuff. Marvel and DC, need to realize that creators are not creating characters for them because they have a place to go, IDW, Dark Horse, Image and stuff, where they can keep their creations. And plus, you know, they've seen the big war horses of the past get screwed over. I mean, Jack Kirby is just now getting credit for, you know, publicly for what he created. And that, you know, and how many years to go to court, and it's all hush hush, and it's because Disney bought him out. And I got a suggestion for Marvel and DC both. Okay, let me make sure here. Okay, give the creators better deals. Basically, is what it comes to when it comes to royalties, and give them credit and stuff. Marvel has ended up just recycling characters. That's why this comes on. That's why I don't like it. You know, Uncanny X-Men. They went ahead and just mixed those two movie franchises together is what they did. The suits are back in there. You know, telling these guys what to do. And you know, we're not going to get. You know, it's very slim for us to get accidents. Wolverine was an accident. Daredevil or Deadpool was an accident. That one still blows my mind because I was there when he came out. You know, these happy accident characters that come out. You know, people aren't creating characters just to keep a story going anymore, making it new and fresh and everything. Marvel's going to screw us over. DC's going to screw us over. You know, DC always had the better reputation on royalties, but not like so much in pay, but as in making sure they got their money because of Paul Levitz. That's why a lot of people were more comfortable working at DC, and you got, you know, a whole lot, you know, more characters here and there. But you know, they just need to stop messing up their characters. DC needs to stop, and if you made it this far into the video, good for you, but you know, this I don't say this to be inflammatory or anything like that, but stop messing with classic characters for the sake of diversity. Okay, Wally West is not black. Okay, there's a Legion member who's part of the Allen family, XS I think's her name, and she's black, and she's a speedster, and she's part of that legacy of the Flash. I'm not comfortable with Sam Wilson becoming Captain America because the Falcon was a great character. I mean, he really was. You know, you already got characters of different races, or go ahead and create a whole new character. You know, and make him something. Take chances with him. Have him be shoulder to shoulder with the legends and stuff. I mean, you get a little. It's like wrestling, man. You know, Ric Flair's job wasn't just to be world champion, but he would go from territory to territory to make their big guy, look good. And nobody knew he was doing it because Ric Flair was that good, and that's what you can do with these. Marvel and DC both need to stop making. DC's gotten a little bit better at it, you know, from what I can recall here. But with Marvel, man, there's more out there than Thanos. Stop treating your freaking villains like jokes, you know. Your hero's going to be that much more. You need to have them cheered for because you got serious villains to fight. There hasn't been a decent Doctor Doom story since Secret Wars number 10, and I saw somebody read that and thought it was just a hack. And I'm just like, okay, you know. But yeah, better villains. Stop treating your villains like jokes. They're not just, you know, something to throw at a hero and stuff. Make it personal, man. That's what brings in money. Those personal stories and stuff. You know, Green Goblin, Spider-Man. You know, and Image is the opposite. The Image is the opposite, man. Saturating the market. I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, it's great that all these books are coming out, and some of them are quality, and some of them aren't. Some of them is opinion and stuff like that. But I'm seeing with them. You know, if you look back on the history I was talking about, they're doing what DC did in the 70s. They're oversaturating the market. You know, this is what happened in the 90s. Too many books on the shelves, not enough money. The prices of books are outrageous. All across the board, everybody needs to use cheaper paper and come down and give us better quality stories, you know. All right, enough of that. I could go on and on. Okay, what artist would you want to do a portrait of you? And his situation is that there's no way to take a picture, and you're dying. You want something for your family, and the comic communities come around you. My guy would be Robert Crumb, of all people. Like I said, I've got a love-hate thing with Robert Crumb because I have a huge problem with the culture that included the drugs of the 60s and 70s. I grew up in the wasteland, is how I feel about it, with, you know, you see people burn out or strung out, you know. I grew up around the hippies that missed out on the love. And this is a big reflection of it, a lot of it is, but Robert Crumb, this book I have, this table book, if I'd gone through it, every couple of years he draws a self-portrait. And he shows himself getting older and stuff. And plus the way he draws women in characters and stuff is that not only does he put a soul in everything he draws, a feeling, but it's completely honest. So, you know, he's the artist that if I was going to leave a portrait for my family because I was about to pass away, I'd want them to see the real me and the honesty, you know, what I really look like. So throughout this book, you know, Robert Crumb came in, and these are self-portraits that he did. And he draws what is really there. You know, it may not be, you know, photorealistic and stuff. There should be another one in here. But it's honest, you know. It's when you see that picture of Robert Crumb, it's Robert Crumb, you know. So much in this book. Sorry. I'm going to find one more just to show you how he aged and how he was honest about that aging. That was probably the last one. So much good stuff in this. Some of the stuff I can't show. I've come this far. Here's where he's put himself in the book. Yeah. Yeah, he draws what's really there. It's slightly a caricature, but it's more like it's a cheat to put some feeling in it. But I would put him in there. Okay. So yeah, Robert Crumb. And then he's got a 3-part question here I'll be real quick with. But he said, you know, he gives you 6 books to choose from. And he puts them in categories, you know, 2 of them. Which 2 would you want, you know, out of these 2? I want to skip ahead to the last one he put. New Mutants number 98, or the Batman Harley Quinn, and I'm assuming he's saying the Batman Harley Quinn special that came out with the Alex Ross cover that put her in the DC Universe proper. I've owned both of those, and I actually still own the Batman Harley Quinn. Okay? Now, is the Deadpool worth more money and the movie about to come out and stuff? Yeah, but when Deadpool came out, in New Mutants 98, back in like 91 or 91 or whatever it was, he didn't really stand out. He didn't really impress a lot of people. It was a Rob Liefeld creation. Rob Liefeld was hot, but I read the book, wasn't impressed. It was kind of weird. And then he popped up in X-Force number 2, which I've got on the shelf over here. That was his second appearance. Again, just threw him in there, and he ran his mouth with just a little bit more than that one. You know, the book's really not that good. I mean, you know, I could sit here and say, oh, it's worth money, and I could resell it because, you know, whatever and stuff. But I was there. I bought it off the shelves. I owned it 2 or 3 times. It was in dollar boxes, quarter boxes, and the fact that it took off, you know, I'm sure that's to do with Joe Kelly and stuff, the writer, and that took him up in 98 or whatever it was. But for me, this is the better quality book. You know, Alex Ross cover, great art, great story inside. Paul Dini's story. Paul Dini, the person who created Harley Quinn, is the one that brought her into the comics and stuff. I think it's just a much better book, collected-wise, you know. Okay. Showcase number 4, Fantastic Four number 1. Showcase number 4 is where Flash came back, and they're saying that's the birth of the Silver Age, or Fantastic Four number 1. And that is a hard choice to make, and I'm going to have to go with Showcase number 4. It's not even a DC or a Marvel thing. And I cannot believe I'm taking the artist of Carmine Infantina over Jack Kirby on this one. But honestly, you know, I think Gardner Fox is the one that came in there and did that. And I always thought for comic books pre-Marvel and stuff, and even a little bit after Marvel, Gardner Fox was the Grant Morrison of his time. That guy even wrote novels. Steve Ogden sent me one of his novels. I finally got to read one. You know, just that one. I think that one's got more history. I think that one's actually more rare to find in my experience. I've seen far more Fantastic Four number 1s at conventions and actually in 2 or 3 collections than in real life than I've seen of the. I've never seen it. I've seen one DC Showcase number 4, and I think that says a lot more. That was a brave thing. That's the first time they took a character and really revamped it for a new generation. You know, and you know. Flash 123 introduced by Gardner Fox introduced the multiverse, and the Flash was a pivotal role in Crisis on Infinite Earth. Flash became a staple of any time there was a big movement in comics. He was right there, you know. And then the last one is Batman #1 or Spider-Man #1, and why. Might get some hate on this one, and I've talked long enough. I did not want to make a 30-minute video, and that's what we're at. But Batman #1, because without Batman, there never would have been a Spider-Man. That's all there is to it. Okay. Hate me if you want. Maybe if anybody's really interested in my opinion on that one, I'll shoot a video in the future. You know. All right, that's it. Good job, Vincru. Didn't mean to go on for so long. Good questions. Really got into it. So I hope I was easy to follow. And you know, good luck with the contest. Everybody else that's out there, good luck with the contest, man.